Computer, run comparative analysis between Zelaxian DNA and standard human genome, Dr. Max Livingston said, leaning back in his hover chair with a yawn. 3 days straight of staring at genetic sequences had left him bleary-eyed and one caffeine pill away from hallucinating. The lab's AI assistant, Cora, responded in her characteristically cheerful voice. Analysis running, Dr. Livingston. Expected completion in 3 minutes. Perhaps while waiting, you'd enjoy a humorous anecdote about nucleotide sequencing. Hard pass, Max muttered, rubbing his temples. Just the results, please. Working at the Galactic Research Institute had its perks: state-of-the-art equipment, unlimited research funds, and the prestige of being one of only 17 humans allowed to poke at alien DNA. The downside? An overly enthusiastic AI assistant programmed by beings who found quantum physics jokes hysterical. As Max waited for the analysis, Dr. Trill slithered into the lab. A cephalopian with 6 tentacle arms and translucent skin that revealed a constantly shifting internal organ system, Trill was the Institute's leading expert on evolutionary genetics. He was also, as far as Max could tell, perpetually concerned about everything. Max, you've been in this lab for 72 standard hours, Trill's voice bubbled through his speech gland. Most fascinating. Are you attempting to replicate human sleep deprivation studies while simultaneously conducting genetic research? A most inefficient approach. Just trying to finish this analysis before the quarterly review, Max said. The Galactic Council wants updates on what makes humans tick. Apparently we make them nervous. Trill's skin flushed a concerned purple. With good reason. Your species leapt from primitive tool use to interstellar travel in less than 10,000 years. Most concerning. Analysis complete, Cora announced. Results display unusual anomaly in human genetic structure, not present in any of the 4,387 catalogued sentient species. Max sat up straight. Define unusual anomaly. A holographic display materialized, showing a rotating DNA strand with a section highlighted in red. Humans possess what appears to be a genetic kill switch sequence, Cora explained, her voice suddenly intrigued. Under specific conditions, this sequence can trigger rapid cellular breakdown, resulting in death within hours. Trill's skin went from purple to an alarmed shade of green. You have evolved with self-destruct protocols. Most disturbing. That can't be right, Max frowned, scrolling through the data. Natural selection favors survival. Why would we evolve a way to die faster? Perhaps humans are simply efficient, even in death, Cora suggested. The sequence appears to activate only under extreme physiological stress, particularly during certain viral infections. Max leaned forward, fascination replacing fatigue. Run a historical cross-reference. See if there's any correlation between this genetic sequence and historical pandemic survival rates. Most concerning, Trill repeated, backing slightly away from Max as though he might spontaneously combust. Your species continues to confound conventional evolutionary theory. It seems counterproductive to evolve a self-termination sequence. Or maybe, Max said, eyes fixed on the rotating model of his species' apparent self-destruct button, it's the most rational evolutionary path nobody else considered. Cora's voice contained a hint of excitement. This discovery certainly merits further investigation, Dr. Livingston. It appears humans remain the only known species with this particular genetic feature. Fascinating indeed. Fascinating, Trill's skin rippled with anxiety patterns. I believe terrifying might be the more appropriate term. I'll inform the Biosafety Committee immediately. As Trill slithered quickly out of the lab, Max couldn't help but smile. Once again, humans had managed to freak out the galactic community just by existing. Cora, let's dig deeper, he said. I want to know exactly what this kill switch does, and why we have it when nobody else does. With pleasure, Dr. Livingston. I find human evolutionary anomalies most intriguing. Yeah, Max muttered. That makes one of us. So you're telling me your species evolved without any genetic kill switches, Max? Asked the Flavivarian scientist, whose flower-like head petals quivered in response. Of course not, Dr. Bloom replied, her voice melodious yet horrified. Evolution selects for survival, Dr. Livingston. Our ancestors spent 6 million years gradually developing resistances to pathogens. Why would we need a self-destruct sequence? It's barbaric. This had been the 7th interview today, and Max was hearing variations of the same answer. He thanked Dr. Bloom and checked his notes as she floated away, petals still trembling. Cora, add Flavarians to the list of sensible evolutionary paths, Max sighed. Meanwhile, humans evolved to just die quickly when infected with certain pathogens. We're the galactic outlier. Again. Technically, Dr. Livingston, Cora chimed in. Your species isn't evolving to just die. The data suggests this mechanism prevents widespread transmission of particularly virulent infections by rapidly eliminating hosts before. Yes, I know, Max interrupted. But try explaining that to the Biosafety Committee. They're treating me like I'm carrying an active plague. The Institute cafeteria had emptied considerably since news of Max's discovery spread. Only the Grolaxians, with their 17 backup organs, seemed unperturbed by his presence. Dr. Trill approached Max's table, maintaining what he probably thought was a discreet distance. The committee has requested your presence, Max. They seem concerned. Of course they are, Max groaned. Cora, download my research notes and follow me. I need backup when they inevitably suggest quarantining all humans in the galaxy. The Biosafety Committee consisted of 12 alien scientists, each representing a major evolutionary branch of sentient life. All 12 pairs of eyes or sensory organs approximating eyes stared at Max with varying degrees of apprehension. Dr. Livingston began chair-being Vux, a gelatinous entity whose translucent body revealed nervous electrical pulses shooting through its neural network. Your discovery raises concerns. With respect, chair-being, humans have existed in the galactic community for centuries without incident, Max argued. This genetic feature clearly hasn't led to any catastrophes. Yet, exclaimed Dr. Grack, the recently appointed Galactic Security Officer. A reptilian draconian with obsidian scales and a perpetual scowl. Grack had made his career by finding threats when none existed. Your species evolved on a Class 5 death world and somehow survived by developing genetic self-destruct capabilities. How is that not concerning? Max took a deep breath. My research indicates this trait actually saved humanity multiple times. When highly lethal pathogens emerged, individuals with this genetic variant died quickly before spreading the disease widely. It was a population-level adaptation, not an individual one. The committee exchanged alarmed glances. Most disturbing, Dr. Trill bubbled. It suggests your species evolved prioritizing collective survival over individual life. Most concerning, says the hive-minded cephalopod, Max muttered under his breath. I heard that, Trill replied. My auditory sensors are quite advanced, despite my lack of external ears. Chair-being Vux's electrical pulses accelerated. We need more data before determining appropriate safety protocols. Dr. Livingston, please continue your research, but under quarantine conditions. Quarantine, Max protested. You realize I can't just switch this gene on at will, right? It requires specific triggers. Nevertheless, Grack interrupted, scales darkening with suspicion. The Galactic Council has expressed interest in your findings. Until we understand the implications, precautions are warranted. As Max left the committee room, Cora pinged him discreetly. Dr. Livingston, the neural network monitoring indicates 6 separate intelligence agencies have accessed your research files in the past hour. Great, Max sighed. So much for scientific curiosity. Now we're a security threat. If it helps, Cora offered cheerfully, I've analyzed your kill switch gene more thoroughly. It appears to activate primarily in response to viruses that target neural tissue or cause hemorrhagic fevers. Quite efficient, actually. Not helping, Cora. A message flashed across Max's comm device. Priority Access Office of Galactic Security. Report immediately for enhanced debriefing. Enhanced debriefing, Max groaned. That sounds painful. According to my databases, Cora replied helpfully, it involves no fewer than 17 different truth verification technologies, 3 of which are still experimental. Perfect. So, not only are we the only species with a genetic self-destruct button, but now I get to be security's new favorite lab rat. As Max headed toward the security wing, he couldn't help feeling that his discovery was quickly becoming less about science and more about politics. The fact that only humans had evolved this particular trait wasn't just scientifically interesting anymore, it was becoming diplomatically problematic. Cora, make me a reminder to never discover anything interesting ever again. Reminder set, Dr. Livingston. Though based on your research history, I calculate a 97.3% probability you'll ignore it. Earth has experienced how many mass extinction events? Dr. Trill's skin cycled through 3 shades of disbelief. 5 major ones before humans evolved, Max replied, pulling up the holographic timeline. Asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, climate shifts, you name it. Earth tried to kill everything on it. The research lab had been converted into what Max now called his scientific prison cell after the enhanced debriefing, which was every bit as uncomfortable as he'd feared. Galactic security had confined his research to a single isolated lab. The only beings allowed in were Max, Cora, Dr. Trill, who'd been appointed as his official minder, and the increasingly suspicious Dr. Grach. Most species evolve on relatively stable worlds, Dr. Trill noted, examining Earth's violent history. The cephalopian homeworld has maintained consistent ecological patterns for over 30 million years. Lucky you, Max muttered, scrolling through human pandemic records. Meanwhile, Earth tried wiping the slate clean every few million years. Species either adapted rapidly or died out. Guess which approach humans took? Apparently the most counterintuitive one, Dr. Grach declared, entering the lab unannounced. The draconian scales glinted under the lab lights as he stalked around the displays. A genetic self-destruct sequence. Quite convenient. Actually, Max countered. It's brilliant evolution. Look at these historical models, Cora. The AI assistant projected a simulation showing the spread of historical human pandemics with and without the kill switch gene. Without this gene, Max explained, virulent pathogens would have spread exponentially through early human populations. Infected individuals would have remained mobile long enough to infect dozens of others. But with the kill switch, the simulation shifted, showing how rapid deaths of infected individuals created natural quarantine zones, allowing uninfected groups to survive. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Cora added helpfully. A fascinating evolutionary strategy. Dr. Grach's tail lashed irritably. What concerns me, Dr. Livingston, is that this kill switch could potentially be weaponized. If someone could artificially trigger this gene across the human population. That's not how genetics work, Max sighed. The activation requires specific viral proteins interacting with. But it could be engineered, Grach insisted, scales darkening. A targeted pathogen designed specifically to trigger human self-destruction. Or conversely, humans could potentially develop a pathogen that triggers similar responses in other species that lack your natural safeguards. Dr. Trill bubbled nervously. Most concerning perspective, Dr. Grach. Oh, for the love of Max threw up his hands. We're geneticists, not bioweapons designers. This is about understanding evolutionary advantages, not creating doomsday scenarios. Cora interrupted with an alert. Dr. Livingston, I've completed the cross-species analysis you requested. Among all known spacefaring species, humans are the only ones to evolve on a planet with multiple extinction-level events during their evolutionary timeline. The holographic display expanded, showing comparative planetary histories. Every other homeworld showed relatively stable geological and ecological patterns, with gradual changes over millions of years. Earth's timeline was punctuated with dramatic upheavals, radical climate shifts, and recurring mass extinctions. It appears, Cora continued, that humans didn't develop the kill switch despite evolutionary pressure, but because of it. Species facing frequent planetary scale threats evolved rapid adaptation mechanisms, including population-level sacrificial traits. Max nodded, understanding dawning. We're not genetic outliers because we're dangerous. We're outliers because we had to be to survive. The galaxy's stable worlds produced stable species. Earth's chaotic history produced humans adaptable, resilient, and willing to sacrifice individuals for species survival. A convenient explanation, Dr. Grach growled. But it doesn't change the fact that humans possess a genetic feature that could be exploited. The Galactic Council has authorized me to implement additional security protocols regarding human movement and research. You're quarantining all humans based on a genetic trait we've had for our entire existence, Max asked incredulously. That's not security, that's discrimination. It's prudence, Grach countered. Until we fully understand the implications, restrictions are warranted. As Grach left the lab, Dr. Trill's skin shifted to a thoughtful blue pattern. I find myself reconsidering my initial assessment, Max. Your species' evolutionary path is indeed unusual, but perhaps adaptive in ways we hadn't considered. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Max said dryly. Too bad Grak doesn't see it that way. Cora's interface pulsed softly. Dr. Livingston, while running comparative analyses, I discovered something else of interest. The human kill switch gene shows evidence of recent evolutionary selection becoming more prevalent after each major pandemic in your history. What are you saying, Cora? I believe this trait is still actively evolving in humans. Your species continues to adapt at a rate far exceeding galactic norms. Max stared at the data, a chill running down his spine. We're still evolving? Even now. Most fascinating, Dr. Trill murmured, his previous concerns seemingly replaced by scientific curiosity. Most fascinating indeed. Max looked up at the holographic image of Earth, with all its violent history and evolutionary pressure. We survived by being willing to die. How's that for a cosmic irony? Before anyone could respond, the lab's emergency system activated, bathing the room in pulsing red light. Attention, all personnel, an automated voice announced. Biohazard containment protocol initiated. Unknown pathogen detected in the station's life support systems. All personnel must report to designated quarantine areas immediately. Max and Dr. Trill exchanged alarmed glances. Well, Max said grimly, looks like we might get to test my kill switch theory sooner than expected. The station's quarantine protocols had failed spectacularly. 3 days into the outbreak, and the medical bay was overflowing with infected personnel from 17 different species. The mysterious pathogen seemed specifically designed to target non-human physiology, causing symptoms ranging from mild cellular dysfunction in draconians to catastrophic organ failure in cephalopians. Max stood in the observation room, watching medical droids frantically trying to stabilize a group of Flavarians whose petals had begun to necrotize. This is insane. How is this thing affecting so many different species, but leaving humans untouched? Unknown, Cora replied, her usually cheerful voice subdued. The pathogen appears to adapt to each species' unique biology, but shows no impact on human cellular structures. Current infection rate stands at 43% of non-human personnel, projected to reach 87% within 48 hours. Dr. Trill lay in a quarantine pod, his translucent skin showing ominous dark patches. Most unfortunate timing, he bubbled weakly. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all. Max approached the pod, careful to maintain the sterile field. How are you holding up, Trill? My secondary cardiovascular system has already failed. Tertiary system showing early signs of infection despite his condition. Trill's scientific curiosity remained intact. Fascinating how the pathogen adapts, almost as if it was designed. The door slid open with a hiss, and Dr. Grak stormed in, flanked by security drones. His scales had dulled considerably, a sign of advancing infection, but his suspicion burned as brightly as ever. This is too convenient. Livingston, he snarled. We discover humans have a genetic kill switch, and suddenly a pathogen appears that targets every species except humans. The council suspects sabotage. Max stared in disbelief. You think we engineered this? That's absurd. We're xenogeneticists, not bioterrorists. Nevertheless, Grak continued, swaying slightly as the infection worked through his system. All humans are being placed under security lockdown while we investigate. You're quarantining the only species not affected by this thing. Max threw up his hands. That's not just bad science, it's suicidal. We should be studying why humans are immune, not locking them up. Your immunity is precisely what makes you suspect, Grak insisted, before a coughing fit doubled him over. Max looked from Grak to Trill, then at the monitors showing the spreading infection throughout the station. A realization began to form. Cora, analyze the pathogen's structure against known viral catalysts for the human kill switch gene. The AI's processors hummed. Analysis complete. The pathogen shares 86% structural similarity with historical human pathogens that trigger the kill switch response. However, it appears modified to target non-human physiologies while leaving the kill switch dormant in humans. That's it. Max's eyes widened. The pathogen is designed to trigger something like our kill switch in species that don't have one. It's forcing an immediate cellular breakdown similar to what happens in humans when our kill switch activates. But since we already have that gene, we're immune. Trill's skin pulsed weakly with interest. Most intriguing hypothesis. But if correct, how does this help us? Max paced the room, thinking rapidly. What if? What if we could use our kill switch as a template for a cure? The gene evolved specifically to combat pathogens like this. If we could extract the mechanism and adapt it. Absolutely not, Grak interrupted, leaning against the wall for support. You're suggesting we take the very thing that makes humans dangerous and spread it to other species. The Council would never. The Council might not have a choice, Max countered. Look around. This station has the highest concentration of xenobiological expertise in the galaxy, and we're all either infected or about to be. If this spreads beyond the station, the implications hung in the air. Even Grak fell silent. Dr. Trill's voice bubbled from his pod. For what it's worth, I find myself reconsidering my position on human evolutionary strategies. There may be wisdom in your species' approach after all. Cora. Max turned to the AI. I need full access to the genetics lab. We're going to isolate the kill switch gene and see if we can adapt it as a treatment. That would violate at least 17 security protocols, Cora noted. However, given the current mortality projections, overriding protocols, lab access granted Dr. Livingston. Grak tried to protest but collapsed into a nearby chair, the infection progressing visibly through his scaled hide. This is exactly what we feared. Humans weaponizing their genetic anomalies. No, Max corrected, already gathering equipment, it's humans using their evolutionary adaptations to save everyone else. There's a difference, he paused, looking at the weakening Draconian. I'm going to need a blood sample from you, Dr. Grak. Why? Should I trust you? Grak wheezed. Because right now, the trait you've been so afraid of might be the only thing that can save your scales. Ironic, isn't it? As Max worked frantically in the lab, Cora projected holographic models of the pathogen's interaction with various species' DNA. The pattern became clear. The pathogen was triggering catastrophic cellular responses similar to the human kill switch, but in species that had no evolutionary mechanism to control or contain it. It's like giving someone a self-destruct button they don't know how to turn off, Max muttered, manipulating genetic sequences. Our kill switch evolved with built-in limitations. It only activates under specific conditions and only in tissues already compromised. These other species have no such safeguards. The station's alert system blared again, warning life support systems compromised in sectors 7 through 12. Emergency protocols initiated. Dr. Livingston, Cora announced, infection rates have reached 68%. Medical bay capacity exceeded. Estimated time to critical station failure 36 hours. Max continued working, sweat beading on his forehead. Then we have 36 hours to turn humanity's most controversial evolutionary trait into the galaxy's last hope. No pressure. In the quarantine pod, Trill watched Max with a mixture of pain and fascination. Most remarkable, that the very trait we feared might become our salvation. Perhaps humans evolved exactly as they needed to. Or maybe, Max replied grimly, the galaxy is about to learn why you don't underestimate a species that evolved on a planet that tried to kill it every few million years. You want to do what the station's chief medical officer, Dr. Lox, a gelatinous Solarian with multiple eye stalks, quivered in what Max interpreted as a mixture of horror and disbelief. Max sighed, rubbing his bloodshot eyes after 20 straight hours in the lab. I'm proposing we create a modified retrovirus based on the human kill switch gene. It'll target the pathogen's replication mechanism without triggering the same catastrophic cellular breakdown in non-human tissues. So you're fighting one pathogen with another pathogen? Dr. Lox's central mass pulsated anxiously. Based on a human self-destruct mechanism that we barely understand. Essentially, yes, Max confirmed. Look, conventional treatments are failing. The infection rate just hit 79%, and we've lost an entire deck to quarantine. Do you have a better idea? The emergency council meeting had been hastily convened in the station's backup command center. Most attendees participated via hologram, their deteriorating conditions making physical presence impossible. Dr. Grak appeared particularly diminished, his scales ashen and flaking. The Draconian military has dispatched containment vessels, Grak wheezed, his voice barely audible. If we cannot contain the outbreak, they will sterilize the station. A shocked silence followed. Define sterilize, Max demanded, though he already knew the answer. A complete thermal purification, Grach managed. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Cora completed. A concept seemingly universal across evolved species, though the implementation varies considerably. Which is why we need to try my solution, Max insisted. Cora and I have run over 5,000 simulations. The modified gene therapy has an 87% chance of success with minimal side effects. And the other 13%, asked Dr. Locks. Max hesitated. Varied outcomes, ranging from no effect to accelerated progression. You're asking us to gamble everyone's lives on a therapy derived from the very genetic anomaly that frightened us in the first place, Dr. Trill observed weakly from his quarantine pod. His condition had deteriorated significantly, with over 60% of his internal organs showing signs of failure. Yes, I am, Max acknowledged. Because that frightening anomaly is exactly what we need right now. Humans evolved this kill switch because our planet kept trying to exterminate us. We survived by adapting, sometimes in ways that seemed counterintuitive or even horrifying to others. He pulled up holographic models showing the modified therapy's projected effect. This treatment uses the regulatory mechanisms of our kill switch, the parts that prevent it from going haywire, and applies them to the current pathogen. It teaches your cells how to die correctly, so the rest of you can live. Die correctly, Dr. Locks's eye stalks twisted in confusion. Controlled cell death is essential to complex life, Max explained. Humans perfected it under extreme evolutionary pressure. Now we're offering to share that adaptation with you. Yes, it's based on something you find disturbing, but it works. Dr. Grach's hologram flickered as he struggled to stay conscious. The Draconian fleet will arrive in 18 hours, if no solution is implemented by then. The unspoken threat hung in the air. I vote we try Dr. Livingston's treatment, Dr. Trill announced unexpectedly, his voice feeble but determined. Most fascinating that we might be saved by the very trait we feared. One by one, the other council members voiced their agreement, some enthusiastically, others with clear reservation. Dr. Grach was the last to speak. I still believe. Humans represent a potential threat, he rasped. But I recognize necessity. Proceed, Dr. Livingston. But be warned. If this goes wrong, you'll hunt down all humans and put us in space jail, Max muttered. Got it. Cora, begin production of the modified retrovirus. We'll need enough doses for everyone on the station. Commencing production, Cora confirmed. Estimated completion time 4 hours, 17 minutes. As the council dispersed, Dr. Locks lingered. This solution of yours. It's quite elegant, actually. Using a controlled version of a kill mechanism to defeat an uncontrolled one. That's evolution for you, Max shrugged. Sometimes the best way to survive is counterintuitive. Perhaps we've been too quick to judge human evolutionary adaptations, Dr. Locks admitted. Your species' development has always seemed haphazard and reckless to us. But maybe there's a method to your madness after all. Oh, I wouldn't go that far, Max laughed wearily. We're still pretty chaotic. But chaos has its advantages when the universe throws extinction-level events at you every few million years. The treatment rollout was anything but smooth. Some species responded immediately, their symptoms receding within hours. Others showed delayed reactions or uncomfortable side effects. A few, particularly those with crystalline-based biology, showed no response at all, requiring custom modifications. Max worked frantically alongside the medical team, adjusting dosages and formulations as Cora continuously monitored, analyzed results. His hands shook from exhaustion and stimulant overuse, but the alternative, watching the station be sterilized, wasn't an option. How's Trill doing? Max asked, checking a batch of modified doses for the Flavarians. Dr. Trill's condition has stabilized, Cora reported. Cellular regeneration has begun in his primary systems. He's asking for you, actually. Max made his way to the quarantine bay, where Trill's pod showed encouraging signs of recovery, his translucent tissues gradually clearing of the dark patches that had been spreading. You look better, Max observed. Less like a swamp and more like a troubled ocean. That's progress, right? Most amusing, Trill bubbled weakly. I wanted to thank you. Your solution was unexpected, but effective. Just doing what humans do best, turning our evolutionary weirdness into something useful. I've been thinking, Trill continued, about evolutionary paths. My species evolved in stable conditions, developing multiple redundant systems and cautious expansion. Your species evolved under chaos, developing adaptations that seem reckless but provide remarkable resilience. Different planets, different strategies, Max shrugged. Neither is inherently better. Perhaps Trill agreed. But in moments of crisis, your approach has distinct advantages. The ability to sacrifice parts to save the whole. It may be time for the galactic community to reconsider its perspective on human evolution. A priority alert interrupted their conversation. Dr. Grack's deteriorating condition had suddenly stabilized, and he was requesting no, demanding to speak with Max immediately. Duty calls, Max sighed. The cranky lizard probably wants to complain about the treatment giving him hiccups or something. Be gentle with him, Trill advised. It's not easy having one's fundamental assumptions challenged so dramatically. Yeah, well, my fundamental assumption was that alien scientists would appreciate good science over irrational fear, so we're all learning something today. As Max left the quarantine bay, Cora updated him. Infection rates have decreased to 43% and falling. Mortality projections are now below critical threshold. The Draconian fleet has been notified of our progress and has agreed to postpone intervention, pending final results. So we're not getting space nuked today. That's something, at least. Indeed, Cora agreed. And Dr. Livingston, your modified therapy appears to have unexpected benefits. Some species are showing improved pathogen resistance beyond the current infection. It appears the regulatory mechanisms from the human kill switch are being integrated into their immune responses. Max stopped walking. Wait, you're saying we've accidentally given alien species a version of our kill switch? In a limited, controlled form, yes. Preliminary data suggests they've gained some of the benefits without the more extreme aspects. Most fascinating, wouldn't you agree? Max laughed, a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Oh, this is going to make for one hell of a research paper. How I accidentally upgraded Galactic Evolution, a human's guide to sharing your weirdest genes. I would suggest a more scientific title for the actual publication, Cora advised. Whatever you say, Cora. First, let's make sure everyone survives. Then we can worry about academic recognition and the inevitable existential panic from the Galactic Council. 78 hours since deployment of the modified therapy, and infection rates have fallen below detectable levels, Cora reported, her voice once again carrying its characteristic cheerfulness. All quarantine protocols have been lifted, and station operations are returning to normal parameters. Max slouched in his chair in the now bustling cafeteria, nursing a cup of what the station claimed was coffee, but tasted more like recycled coolant fluid. Define normal parameters, because before all this, normal included treating humans like we might spontaneously combust. Fair point, Dr. Livingston, Cora conceded. Perhaps new normal would be more accurate. The social dynamics appear to have shifted considerably. That was an understatement. Where once alien colleagues had maintained a polite but wary distance from humans, now they approached with something resembling genuine curiosity, even admiration. Several had stopped by Max's table already, offering variations of gratitude and philosophical musings about evolutionary paths. Dr. Trill slithered up to join him, looking almost completely recovered. Only a slight discoloration in his translucent tissues hinted at his recent brush with death. Most remarkable recovery, Trill bubbled, settling his tentacles comfortably. The Galactic Medical Association has requested complete documentation of your therapy for inclusion in standard treatment protocols. How generous of them, Max replied dryly. Last week they wanted to quarantine all humans as potential biohazards. This week they want our genetic secrets. Funny how that works. Evolution is adaptable, Max Trill said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. And so are scientific perspectives. Speaking of which, you may find today's council session interesting. Please tell me they're not planning to dissect me for further study. Nothing so crude, Trill assured him. Though I believe several xenogeneticists have submitted research proposals involving voluntary human genetic sampling. Most enthusiastic proposals, actually. Max groaned. Great. We've gone from potential threats to potential lab rats. Such progress. The Galactic Council chamber was unusually crowded for what was supposed to be a routine session. Representatives from a dozen major species had gathered, along with a surprising number of scientific observers. Max found himself directed to a seat of honor rather than his usual spot in the visitors' gallery. Chair being Vux's gelatinous form pulsed with formal patterns as the session opened. The council recognizes Dr. Max Livingston, whose innovative adaptation of human genetic traits saved this station and potentially prevented a galactic pandemic. Dr. Livingston, the council extends its official gratitude. A round of appendage tapping the closest thing to applause in a multi-species assembly followed. Thanks, Max said awkwardly. Though to be fair, it was really evolution doing most of the heavy lifting. I just borrowed what natural selection already figured out. Nevertheless, Vux continued, your actions have prompted a necessary re-evaluation of galactic perspectives on human evolutionary adaptations. What was previously viewed as a potentially dangerous anomaly has demonstrated significant benefits in crisis situations. Dr. Grack stepped forward, his scales once again gleaming with health, though his expression remained characteristically stern. The Security Office has revised its assessment of human genetic features. While continued monitoring is prudent, we acknowledge that diversity of evolutionary approaches strengthens the galactic community rather than threatening it. That almost sounded like an apology, Max whispered to Trill. Most remarkable achievement, Trill replied quietly. The Security Office has never revised an assessment in recorded history. Chairbeam Vux's electrical patterns shifted to what Max had come to recognize as the formal announcement configuration. In light of recent events, the Council proposes the establishment of the Evolutionary Diversity Initiative, dedicated to studying unique adaptations across species for mutual benefit. Dr. Livingston, we invite you to serve as the human representative on this initiative. Max blinked in surprise. You want me to help other species understand our weird genetic quirks? More accurately, Vux clarified, we seek to understand all evolutionary paths, including those that initially appear counterintuitive or even alarming. Your species' adaptations have demonstrated that there is wisdom in diversity of approach. Well, when you put it that way, I accept. As the formal proceedings concluded, Max found himself surrounded by scientific representatives from various species, each eager to discuss potential research collaborations. The change in attitude was dramatic from suspicion to fascination in less than a week. Dr. Locks approached, eye stalks quivering with excitement. Dr. Livingston. My team has been analyzing the modified therapy's long-term effects. The regulatory mechanisms from the human kill switch appear to be establishing permanent beneficial changes in treated individuals. We're considering a voluntary program to implement similar adaptations across multiple species. Wait, Max held up his hands. You want to deliberately engineer other species to have something like our kill switch? Wasn't everyone terrified of this thing a week ago? The perspectives evolved, Dr. Locks replied simply. The capacity for controlled cellular sacrifice under specific conditions provides significant survival advantages. Several species have already expressed interest in genetic modification programs. This is moving a bit fast, don't you think? Max asked. We're talking about fundamental changes to evolutionary paths that took humans millions of years to develop. Most fascinating ethical concerns, Dr. Trill noted, joining the conversation. Though I must confess, my own species has initiated preliminary studies on implementing similar adaptations. The advantages are simply too significant to ignore. Max ran a hand through his hair, feeling a strange mixture of pride and concern. So humans go from galactic outliers to evolutionary trendsetters in one crisis? I'm not sure if I should be flattered or worried. Perhaps both, suggested Cora, who had been quietly observing. My analysis suggests the galactic community is beginning to appreciate the value of evolutionary diversity. However, there are certain philosophical questions about deliberately adopting traits that evolved under specific planetary conditions. You think? Max laughed. What's next? Species deliberately evolving redundant organs because cephalopians have them. Everyone adopting crystalline biology because it works for the Trizalians. Actually, Dr. Locke's eye stalks twisted in what might have been embarrassment. There are already 7 research proposals for adaptable organ redundancy systems based on cephalopian models. Dr. Grack approached their group, his posture stiff but less antagonistic than usual. The Security Office will be closely monitoring all genetic modification programs, of course. While we recognize the benefits, appropriate safeguards must be maintained. Some things never change, Max muttered. On the contrary, Grack replied, Surprising Max with what almost looked like a smile, many things have changed, including my assessment of human evolutionary strategies. They remain concerning but impressively effective. Coming from you. That's practically a love letter, Max quipped. As the gathering continued, Max found himself watching the intermingling of species with a new perspective. The very trait that had made humans suspects had ultimately brought the galactic community closer together, albeit through a near-catastrophic crisis. You know, he said to no one in particular, humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I never expected it to apply so literally to galactic politics. Most appropriate aphorism, Trill agreed. Though perhaps in this case, what nearly kills everyone makes them reconsider their prejudices would be more accurate, if less elegant. Max laughed. I'll drink to that. Speaking of which, I hear the cafeteria has finally fixed the synthetic alcohol replicator. Anyone care to join me in a toast to evolutionary diversity and near-death experiences? As they made their way through the station, Max noticed a group of students from various species gathered around a holographic display of human DNA, pointing excitedly at the kill switch sequence. Cora, should I be concerned that our genetic oddities have become the station's latest fascination? I believe the human phrase is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, Cora replied. Yeah, but there's a fine line between flattery and we want your genes for our biological weapons program, Max observed dryly. Most insightful concern, Trill commented. Though I suspect the reality will prove both more mundane and more profound. The galaxy is beginning to understand that evolution takes many paths, and judging one by the standards of another is both unscientific and unwise. Well, Max raised his glass once they reached the cafeteria. Here's to evolutionary oddities and the aliens who've decided to steal them. May your engineered kill switches never need to activate, but save your scales if they do. To controlled cellular sacrifice, Dr. Lox's eye stalks wriggled in what passed for a toast among Solarians. To diversity of approach, Trill added. To necessary safeguards, Grak muttered, but raised his glass nonetheless. As Max looked around at his alien colleagues, who now viewed humans not as evolutionary accidents, but as uniquely adapted survivors, he couldn't help but wonder what Earth's ancient microbes would think if they knew their attempts to wipe out humanity had ultimately led to humans becoming the galaxy's genetic role models. Evolution, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all.